Yeah, I'm very pleased to welcome Florian Blank as our second keynote speaker, and based on our idea to initiate a dialogue between social work and social policy research, Florian, he represents the latter. And we now want to jump to a different but not less relevant perspective, because in Germany there have been very, very important reforms going on that affect the life of the target group we are interested in. Florian looks at these trends and decisions in German activation and minimum income policies, and he's a great expert in this field. He has studied political science, philosophy, and applied cultural studies at the universities of Münster and Nottingham, and received a doctorate in political science and a scholarship from the Hans-Böckler Foundation. Today, he's the head of the social policy unit of the Institute of Economic and Social Research at the Hans-Böckler Foundation. For those, maybe the international guests, the Hans-Böckler Foundation is funded by German trade unions. It sees itself as an independent institution for the promotion of science and studies, and it's also engaged in policy consultancy. So it's a very interesting position at the intersection between research and politics, and Florian has widely published on various relevant issues of welfare state research, among other things on the topics of welfare markets, pension reforms, and social assistance reform. I just want to mention briefly two examples of his manifold publication activities. For one, I was happy to work with him together as a co-editor of a special issue of the research journal WSI-Mitteilungen, and it was on the representation of weak interests in the welfare states, and there are other colleagues around who also participated in this special issue. And the second the second publication is an edited book where Florian also contributed major chapters, and it is called Thinking Further About Basic Security, so Grundsicherung weiterdenken. And it is available as open access and published by Transcript, and develops very important ideas, or brings together research on how our basic security system has developed and how it works. And so this brings us to the topic for today. Florian, we are very much interested in how you look at the development in the German social policy after the Hartz reforms and with the new Bürgergeld. Welcome, and thanks that you are here today.
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me, and it sounds so great. I'm the head of the social policy unit at the WSI, but it's only me, so it would basically be better to say I'm a senior researcher there, but it sounds great to be introduced this way. And as Simone said, I come from the field of social policy research, welfare state research, so I'm talking about the environment, which you had in the left field of your presentation. And so this is actually kind of an adventure for me to speak here, because the adventure is not only coming here with the German railway system, but also the question, how does what I do fit to the debate of within the discipline of social work? How does it fit to the work, the practical work of social workers? And on the one hand, it's the environment, sure, but on the other hand, this environment, has certain possibilities to engage, to be heard. And I think during my presentation there will be at least 2 slides where we can build the bridges from the welfare state research to the academic discipline of social work. My starting point and the outline here is what we are witnessing now is a government who tries to enact social policy reforms that directly refer back to the past, and not in the normal way where politicians have to deal what their predecessors already did and have to do with institutions that are there and have to be changed again and adapted again. But they directly refer to reforms, and sometimes to reforms the same parties enacted about 20 years ago. So Simone already mentioned the Hartz reforms, which is one of these reforms. And I'm not sure whether somebody knows some examples from other countries where this direct link to the past is made. So we have to overcome these reforms. We have to come to terms with what we did before. But that's what's happening in the moment. And these reforms were described as paradigm changes. So, or in the words of Peter Hall, we could label them third level changes of policy making. And the question is, what's happening now? Is it only kind of a facade? We say we're kind of overcoming these decisions, or is it rhetoric, or are they really doing a roll back? Are they going back in time? Are they turning back the clock and do another paradigm shift in the opposite direction? So the outline of my presentation is pretty simple. I'll take you from the past to the present. So we'll check what happened then, what are these decisions they are now trying to reform or adapt, and go step by step through the years, not through every year, to find out what's happening now. What you should know is we had shifting coalition governments since late 1990s. Before that, we had a very stable phase of conservative liberal governments. And in 1998, the Social Democrats, SPD, and the Green Party formed a coalition government, and many persons expected that they would stand for a more social attitude and for better social policies. And after some years, they changed their attitude, their stance towards social policies, and enacted reforms that we will today treat as retrenchment policies, and others will come to that into detail. And after that, we had a long period where the government was headed by a conservative politician, Angela Merkel, but she reigned together in a coalition government for most of the time, again with the Social Democrats. So for the last, more than 20 years, the Social Democrats were in government, except for 4 years between 2009 and 2013. So there's pretty much stability in the system, and the Social Democrats always had the Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs, often the Ministry for Health, and often the Ministry for Families, elderly persons, the youth, and women. So, and now we are back with a red-green and liberal government, and now it seems to be the time to go back in time to deal with what they did before. So what happened then? What's the policies they are now coping with? So there were some major reforms during these years, especially between 2002 and 2005. Sorry, 2001 and 2005. They are often, again, labeled as a paradigm shift. And in social policy research, they are described using words retrenchment, so cuts, not only in spending overall, but cuts in benefits. Privatization, so everybody has to cope for him or herself. Welfare markets, so the introduction of new players in the game, commercial providers of social services, for example, and activation policies and labor market policies. So it's not only active labor market policy, but persons are seen as responsible to be active in the labor market, not only to be active, but to be successful in the labor market. I will not go into every detail of every political decision. First, because I do not have the time. Second, because I'm pretty bad at remembering single numbers and single details. But I think I can present to you the very broad lines of these years. I'll focus especially on pension and labor market policies, because that's where the decisions that affect minimum income schemes, which are of special interest here and today, are affected. So before the major decisions, the pension system can broadly be described as a public system, as a pay-as-you-go system, which had the aim to protect the living standard. And as a kind of normal employee, you should not rely, or were not supposed to rely, on other ways of saving or buying a private insurance contract. So that's the old world. And as regards unemployment benefits, before the 2004 reform, we had a three-tier system. First, an insurance benefits, unemployment benefit, or unemployment benefit 1, an insurance benefit that is linked to your former wage. So if you had a high income, you would receive a higher benefit than if you had a lower income before. So the benefit is as a percentage of your prior net income. If you were not eligible to this benefit, or not eligible anymore to it, then you had to rely on unemployment assistance, which always provided wage replacement on a lower level, was mildly mean tested, and tax financed. It was administered by the unemployment insurance, but it was not an insurance benefit in a strict sense. And for all those who did not qualify for this kind of benefit, there was a classical social assistance benefits, mean tested or fully mean tested, a flat rate scheme, flat rate as regards the standard amount of benefits, but with additional personalized benefits, for example, the appropriate costs of housing or heating. So what happened next? With regard to pension policies, we have still a public pension insurance, which is still the most important pillar of the whole system. But there was a decrease, or there was an alteration of a formula that adjusts the pension benefits every and each year. And this alteration was meant to lead to a decreasing benefit level. So the old aim of protection of a living standard was altered in a way, or changed in a way, that you should also take out private insurance to achieve the old total benefit level again. So as a part of a mixture, so to say, of retrenchment in the public system and privatization in the whole system. There were also cuts in recognition of times without employment. And what was new, there was an introduction of a special branch of social assistance, a kind of mild version of social assistance to care for the elderly and for the disabled persons. Again, it had all the traces of classical social assistance schemes, a flat rate basic benefit, and then in addition to that, personalized benefits. Unemployment benefits were subject to many reforms, but the most notorious are connected to the name of Peter Hartz, who headed a commission on reforming the whole labor market, or the whole bunch of labor market policies. And as part of the so-called Hartz IV laws, there was a merger of unemployment and social assistance, even though some makes a footnote to this merger that it was not a real merger, but more or less a new kind of social assistance that was introduced, because the old logic of wage replacement in the unemployment assistance was simply terminated. So now there is a new minimum income scheme, flat rate, And at the start, in the beginning, it was 345 euros for a single adult, again with personalized benefits for housing and heating, and again with a harsh means test. So it was really harder to access. The conditions to receive this benefit are much harder than in the old unemployment assistance scheme. And connected to this was also a new way to treat unemployed persons. There was an activation turn. So there's, for example, if you are unemployed and you are not in the realm of the unemployment insurance anymore, there's no protection of your former qualifications. You have to take every job that's offered to you, and it's a work-first approach. So it's not about qualifying people or looking what's really best for them, sondern there was a label, every job is better than no job. So a completely new approach, not only to the benefit system, but a new approach to deal with the people. And after that, there were some really fierce political reactions. And that's maybe the first slide which built a bridge, or which can build a bridge to the profession of social work, because there was much activism. There were many demonstrations, especially in the first years after the reform, directed against Hartz IV, and we have to say, well, then it was without success. There were also other reactions in the whole political system. So social policy or policy making did not only alter the contents of social policy, but in a way they shifted the whole political system. So there was a political feedback because a new party emerged, especially in Western Germany, which later merged with the PDS, a socialist party based especially in Eastern Germany. And now we have a party system where there is a party, established party, left of the Social Democrats. And so it's not only about social policies in this respect, it's about social politics too. There has been, since the reforms of the pension system as well as of the labor market policies, constant criticism by charities, by trade unions, consumer associations, researchers, and I think that's important too, constant nagging within the Social Democrats in order to revise this system. So I think there was no year since 2004 when there were not a study published, an article published, which criticized the system and argued, well, it was wrong. It was simply wrong to do that because it was bad for the people, it doesn't work. There are many reasons to criticize the system from a political point of view, from a purely technical point of view, but it didn't stop. It's kind of, well, maybe it's from a point of a political scientist surprising and not from the point of view of an activist, but it's kind of surprising that there was a constant debate for about 20 years of how to deal with the system and how to change the system. So people were not satisfied with it. And even within the governing party, the Social Democrats, which was responsible for many, many years for social policy making in this country. And in a certain sense, this hasn't stopped until today. So we come directly, or in 2 or 3 slides, to the current debates. And I don't think that the current decision will stop the debate about how pension policies and labor market policy should develop during the next year. I think I'll skip that one and we'll come directly to the Merkel years. The Merkel years, I'm doing some work with a colleague of mine on how to understand social policies in these 16 years. These years witnessed many single reform steps, many new laws, but surprisingly they do not add up to a big reform scheme or story, I would say. That doesn't mean that these single steps were not important to persons, that there were cuts of benefits or calculation rules. There were some improvements, But altogether, they do not add up, in my opinion, to a new paradigm shift. So it was a phase when there was permanent activity in social policy making, but there was no grand design, so to say. So what happened, both in pensions and in unemployment, minor adjustments, some major adjustments in every direction, yeah. But on the whole, the system wasn't changed in its basic traits. However, there were some first steps that may be seen as, well, test runs or, yeah, for the reforms that are now enacted by the current government. In pension policies, they made a decision that the benefit level should be stabilized, at least temporarily, for about 7 years, I think it was the decision then. And in unemployment policies, there was first a ruling of the Constitutional Court on the penalties that unemployed persons who do not play the game right have to face. And that led to a stop, moratorium on penalties for at least, I think, a year or two. And during the COVID pandemic, we had an easier access to unemployment benefits. And even though these were temporary measures, one could argue that during these periods, the labor administration kind of exercised and tried to find out what is possible, and politicians learned what can be done during when they want to change the system in this direction or another. What happened during the Merkel years was also, let the system run, so to say. There were these decisions, and now we see what's happening as a consequence of the earlier decision. And with respect to the minimum income benefits for the elderly, we see that as a consequence of different factors, the number of persons who receive these benefits and the percent of persons above retirement age who have to rely on this minimum income schemes rose during the years, and actually it doubled, more than doubled. And during, while we could argue during the first years, well, it's a new benefit, people have to learn how to apply for it, they have simply to learn that there is a benefit. During the last years, it's simply a matter of people seem to be more reliant on minimum income schemes because the overall pension system has been weakened. With respect to unemployment benefits, what you see here is a kind of a comparison. The purple lines show the total number of recipients of unemployment benefits 2, which is Hartz 4, but only the unemployed person within the system, not the family members, for example. So only a person which is unemployed and receives the benefits is shown here. And the light blue lines are the recipients of the traditional unemployment benefit from the unemployment insurance. And while these numbers are somewhat tricky because it's persons in a year and it's not corrected for the duration of benefit received, these numbers are often used to argue that the means tested benefit is more important today than the insurance benefits, which are traditional, a signifying part of the German welfare state. We are a social insurance state, and what we see here is that with respect to unemployment, it shifted to a more or less means-tested system with an additional insurance benefit for persons who really have good jobs, who qualify for insurance benefits. So what's happening now? The coalition government promised in its coalition treaty or coalition agreement to enact some major reforms again. So instead of the present basic income scheme, we will introduce a Bürgergeld, literally a citizen's money. Yeah? This shall respect the dignity of the individual, empower persons to participate in society, and will digitally and easily accessible. So we want to get rid of this old system of Hartz IV. We want to have a new system. And with respect to pension policies, they want to permanently stabilize the benefit level, so the pension insurance shall be, well, saved, so to say. So what to deal with that in detail? The Bürgergeld. There's an adjustment of benefits in face of inflation, plus 53 euros, but one have to know that this adjustment would have happened later in the year anyway. So what they decided is not we calculate it anew and make it more generous, but an increase is now made earlier than it would have been under the old rules. And this also affects the minimum income schemes for the elderly and the disabled persons. Now there will be a limited protection of your personal situation with regard to housing, or, when you get unemployed and when you are in a situation that you have to rely on unemployment benefits too, or the new Bürgergeld, and your savings are better protected too, but that's only for 1 year, and after that the old rules apply. With respect to activation, there's a change because they promised and put it into the law that the work first principle should be abolished. So in favor of education and training, so persons should receive a different kind of support when dealing with the administration. So it's not, here's a job, you have to take it, but the approach is more, what can we do for you to qualify you in order to make you kind of a person that receives the job you want to have. Overall, there's a story of better accessibility, less bureaucracy, just being kinder to the persons, being more practical with the persons. So while this is already part of legislation, with respect to pension policies, there are more plans, the stabilization of the benefit level, more and better, yeah, I guess so, capital funding, including capital funding in the public pension schemes, but we do not have the drafts of the laws seen until now. We'll see what happens. So what does that mean? Is it really turning back the clock, going back to the early 2000s, into the good old social insurance welfare state of Germany? Well, we have to say that all these measures, they are improvements. Yes, okay. Yeah, but from a social policy perspective, if we look on unemployment benefits too, or the new Bürgergeld, nothing much happened. Yeah. There's no general revision of the benefit calculation, and there is no return to wage replacement. It's better, I hope so, I hope that it will work out. It's a better mean-tested minimum income scheme, but it's not going back to the old unemployment assistance scheme. With respect to the labor market perspective, well, we simply do not know what will really happen. Because there's a promise to treat people better. There's a promise that work first is history. But that's maybe the second bridge to the social work community. Much will depend on how the administration will deal with new rules. Whether they will really have a holistic and kind of benevolent approach to unemployed persons. If they are really able in the framework they have to deal with unemployed persons on a really equal level of Augenhöhe, as they say in Germany. And it's completely unknown how they will deal with so-called problem cases, schwer erreichbare Fälle, if the penalties are not as harsh as they were before. So it's a challenge to the labor administration. And it will be also a challenge, I think, to social workers who assist unemployed persons to deal with the administration, how they can manage the new system. So there's no new paradigm shift backwards, no change as regards the relation of unemployment benefits 1 and 2. And already there are some charities or activist groups that are really skeptic as regards the real effects of these changes. Well, in the field of pension policies, well, there will be improvements, but again, there's no general increase of the benefit level, no step away from the multi-pillar system with private pensions being one pillar, and there is no general answer of how to deal with persons who do not fit the standard employment model, which is still kind of part of the imagination of the pension insurance system as regards to benefits calculation. With a minimum income scheme for the elderly and disabled, well, there is no general revision of benefit calculation. It's the same system as before, basically. So no new paradigm shift backwards. The future relation of pension insurance and minimum income scheme is not clear. We simply do not know what will happen because the adjustment in one case reacts directly to inflation, but also to consumer spending. The other system reacts to wages, and we do not know how these will react to inflation. So we don't know whether these systems will move closer or if there is a stronger social insurance in the end. And already there's skepticism and criticism by trade unions, researchers, charities again. So my final remarks. While social insurance systems still remain the biggest part of the German welfare state, and in my opinion still the signifying part of the welfare state, the minimum income policies have been getting more important, and I think they will get even more important in the next years. The current reforms include improvements, that's okay, yeah, but they are facilitated by a, well, pretty good economic situation still, despite all the crisis. And they are a reaction to electoral losses and substantive criticism. The point is that we are kind of lacking the vocabulary in welfare state reform or research to describe these decisions. They are expansions of the welfare state in one respect, so the opposite of retrenchment policies. But how to deal with these kind of corrections of the corrections of the corrections? So what is its overcoming rhetoric? How to describe that? And I sometimes think that maybe Franz Xaver Kaufmann, a sociologist who did much work on social policy, offers some concepts we can deal with. He once said that we have first-order social policy that is a reaction to social problems, and second-order social policies that react to this first-order reaction and try to deal with the systemic consequences of interventions in society. And maybe we should try to understand that what we are now witnessing is a reaction not so much to social problems, or only partly to social problems, but to social politics and earlier political decisions more than to a close description of what's happening in society. So it's a kind of mechanism within politics more than an actual attempt to deal with social policy problems in a strict and narrow sense. So, and again, this may be of interest for social workers, especially, that all these reforms do not only affect the living conditions of persons and create institutions or change institutions, but there's always a political feedback. And this feedback affects organizations such as welfare associations, trade unions, consumer associations. So the environment is again shifted for those who deal on a daily basis with the consequences of social policy decisions. Thank you for your attention. I'm open for any questions.